let's welcome everybody. We are doing our first live stream of the Federation X podcast, running on tangents. We have tentatively titled this episode 11 billion. This one goes out to IceHog. All right. And with me is Jason Price of Johnny XS fame. Welcome to the show. This is the first time you've been back since we started doing these again.
Yeah, and I've been listening, like I just told you, and you know, I've been listening to the old podcast. So to make everybody more comfortable with how the old podcast went.
Yeah, that's right. Click, click, click.
That's probably my best, what I was most known for was dead air and that and punchline. So
that was your hallmark, was the click, the dead air, and some absolute singers. Although I do think Gino owns the dead air. Like, it really belongs to him.
Well, so with Gino, though, it would be dead air for like 10 seconds. And then it would go, and then he would always have something good to say at least.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Although I was listening recently to part 2, which we just posted, of the Titus Fuchs interview. And you took over the interview in part 2 for the early part of it. I thought you did a great job.
No, it was terrible.
That was
Jordan and his canned questions.
Hey, those canned questions and the structure he put around it at least stopped it from being a complete cluster.
Yes, I agree with that.
Yeah, totally true. So speaking of, and now that we've got you back, let's do a little bit of introduction. We are going to get to Ask XS because we've seen from a ton of people a whole bunch of questions. Some of them just about inappropriate enough to fit right in your wheelhouse too.
Yes.
So,
I'm looking forward to this.
But we will get to that. Let's start and let's ask a couple other questions. Let's assume that not everybody listening knows everything about you. What player would you say, like, is XS the character you're best known for, or is there another character you would be better known for?
Yeah, I mean, to all three of you that are probably watching this live who have no wife or girlfriend, or maybe you would be hiding in the shitter like I used to and still do for my 3-year-old. Definitely more known for Johnny XS. I ran him longer. You know, I came to FedEx with him from Wrestle. You know, and you know what? Initially, I never planned on coming to FedEx with him, to be honest. I was doing really well in Wrestle. I enjoyed it there, even though it was costing me a small fortune to compete every month, which is, again, my fault. Everybody, I know a lot of people don't know the story, but I'm the one that suggested to Burnt, you know, randomly, hey, you know what would be a good idea to get some money for this? Boy, was I stupid. Yeah. But,
well, what, did you get free Wrestlebucks for life? Like, what the hell?
I got nothing except a good laugh when I heard he died. Just kidding. Starting off strong, I know. So, so you know, I would periodically scan the old FedEx boards, right, when you guys first went over to the indie the circuit there. And I remember I saw a post, I think it was by Kat, and I don't remember the main details of it, but he had mentioned XS and Static in it, and he made a gay joke in it, which made me laugh out loud really hard. And, you know, if I was still not young, but if I was still, you know, sort of a beginner, I probably would have been all pissed off, but I found it hysterical. I'm like, oh, you know what? That's probably a place I could see myself playing eventually. So, you know, I don't think I came over until you guys got off of Wrestle, or maybe I did towards the end of it. I don't think you were commissioned then when I came over. I think it was maybe Crazy Ivan or somebody like that might have been running.
Oh yeah, there was a period where that would have been the end of the first indie run when Crazy Ivan was pitching, and I think helping. I think Eric was working on it with Liv Dead. Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, it was run by and it was just a ton of girl wrestlers. So I'm like, oh, this is a great time to bring XS over and potentially have his way with somebody. I think I just had him chasing around one girl. I don't remember who it was, but. And then Haley, I mean, she was definitely my second character, you know, probably one of the more successful female characters in Wrestle. FedEx, she never caught on too much. I just had her marry Gino, and we had a bunch of retarded angles with him. And Max, of course, later on.
And Max, of course. That was actually interesting because she had some really serious success in wrestle. Like you won a number of big events with her, and really was foundational. The tag team with Hype, and there was a number of big things for her. And really, the best posts with her almost were the ones Gino wrote in FedEx, right? Like that's like he used her with more interest, I think, in FedEx than you did.
Oh, 100%. I think I had her in FedEx just to kind of, I wasn't as competitive with her there, right? It was just kind of to go with flow and run angles, right? And Gino used her, way more consistently. I was actually looking through old FedEx posts before. Like I said, I'm technically under a one-day quarantine right now. So I had a lot of time on my hands while I had a beer and ate some food before. And every one of Gino's posts for like a 3-year period on and off had her in it. And I couldn't find one post that I did in that time.
That sounds right.
Very on character for me.
Now you mentioned earlier, but I think it bears repeating for everybody. Why are you in quarantine?
I had to go to Florida for a few days to see my really old grandparents who were about as Lars's age.
That's the part I knew you'd get back to. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm sure Tim will really appreciate it. So that crossover right at the end of that FedEx run was kind of your first foray into FedEx, and then you kind of came in a little more full force the next go around when we kind of got things going and we had left Wrestle at that point. But you and I traded a couple things because I couldn't remember how XS and Ed ended up even really connected. Why don't you share with everybody, because like you were saying earlier, it was really kind of a shot in the dark that just worked out.
Yeah. I remember XS had a match against my all-time favorite FedEx wrestler, Nighthawk, who also is the worst character ever created, but we can get into that later.
So hold on, just to be clear, worse than Aaron Action. You would rather hang out with Aaron Action?
That's tough. That's like trying to choose, do I want to eat diarrhea or do I want to eat cum-filled diarrhea?
That's
kind of the same thing in the end.
It's a terrible visual.
One, because at least you get protein out of that.
If anybody had any doubt that it wasn't just on the boards, that this is who he was, I think we've proven it now.
Yeah, I'm a real disgrace, I know.
That's right.
But yeah, so XS had a title shot against Nighthawk, I believe. And again, I didn't really know much about your character back then. I still don't know much about your character other than he's vapid and boring. But I posted that XS had somehow ran into Ed and I think was going to pay him off to do a run-in. And I don't even know, to be honest with you, if you were running both characters at that point. That was a while. So I don't even remember if I just posted it or if I posted it and shot Ed a private message. But you ran with it, ran in. They beat him up a little bit. I think I still lost the match. And but then after that, we started, posting off each other. Tag team for a long time. The dynamic with my favorite dynamic was when XS had to choose between Ed and Strife as to who to hang out with, and he would talk shit about Strife to Ed, but then when Ed would leave, he'd be all buddy with Strife and really want his best friend. It was a lot of fun.
It really was entertaining, especially when Strife showed up and the dynamic was playing out live with all three of us. He really sold it well. You played it up well, and I just punched everything that moved. The dynamic was entertaining. I would have enjoyed seeing that play out more. I think one of the things I made a note, it wasn't in my original questions for you, but since you mentioned them, I think everybody raves about Strife, and rightfully so. Very talented, very entertaining, can sell everything. Does Static get enough credit for what he was capable of, or is he just the joke because of how he got played after he stopped playing?
So it's funny. So you did send me like a bunch of potential questions, and Static was mentioned, I think, as I jotted down notes for the first time in my life, I think, for one of these podcasts or calls or whatever. So I didn't look like a complete and utter fool. So I'm trying to remember things. But, Static was one of those guys that he was another one that he not only knew XS's character really well, but he's the one that initially pushed me away from being so serious. Like when Johnny was up and coming in wrestle, and
hey, I got to pause you for a second because I'm seeing comments come in. So we are actually getting some comments. First of all, Bagel Guy, you can suck it. You're a complete shit poster, and I don't want to hear any trash talk from you. And the other question is from Colt Calhoun, who wants to know if you've jerked off yet.
Not yet today.
Of course it is. Sorry. Go back to your story about.
No, it's fine. I love those type of questions from Colt, especially. I knew we would be one of the three that's actually watching this piece of shit. So Static was one of the first ones that actually allowed his character to get away from being so serious.
Right.
When I was in wrestle, like the main thing was to try to win the TSOB or the USOB, whatever they called it, and I was really focused with feuds and really he was probably a 75% feuder back then, Johnny.
Oh wow, okay.
And then with Static, he would just post something ridiculous from time to time, and really not in a zany way like the system or the AOD would do, but he would kind of meet in the middle, right? It would be, let's do something to start a feud, but let's also be a little stupid at the same time. And that's when I really started, not taking XS so seriously and just having more fun with him.
Which is so funny to me because that's how I think about XS. Like, I don't think about him being a shooter. I think about, like, the first time I killed Ed and I was like, I'm done. And you're like, I got to get a voodoo priest and bring him back and he's going to be acid dead. Yeah. And I'll just have the zombie sidekick. Like, I think about XS and I go, I can't imagine. Like, I can imagine you as a shooter. I can't imagine him as a shooter. Right? I imagine XS always kind of as that quippy, don't take anything too seriously unless it's the things that really are inappropriate, and then take them super seriously. Like, so that the idea that Static is the one that really led you to that characterization of him is interesting.
Yeah, and there was one, I was trying to think of like one other moment. So there was, I don't remember what event it was, but there was a Fed-wide event in wrestle, and I think we got split into teams of 5, and I think I got stuck with like 3 or 4 of the system members, and somehow one of them gave me a pill to turn XS gay. So I role played the entire event as, instead of JXS, I was gay XS. And he just kept trying to grab dick and everything like that. So I think that was another part of his evolution of his character.
Right.
I would totally roll with anything ridiculous and take whatever, I would not usually, but sometimes I would take something really stupid and just run with it for a long time.
Yeah. Well, it gives you a lot of freedom, right? I think that's one of the crazy things that shows up. Some of the characters and the people we remember as the best players were the ones that didn't take it too seriously. Right. And when you threw ridiculously at them is when we saw some of their best work.
Yeah.
The fact that,
you guys were talking about on the other pod about, when we were when we started the talent Nazis, but I don't know if you remember, like the real reason, not the real reason, but the event that really kicked it off was, and I don't remember the wrestler's name, but XS had a match with him, and Johnny was always very, he loved his mustache. Half of his posts involved him combing it or running his hair.
That's right.
And he shaved XS's mustache to be like Hitler's, and that was the start of.
Yeah, I don't remember who it was either, but I will say huge mistake.
Yeah. And then the goose stepping started, and the rest is history.
I'm pretty sure we were fine through that. We were fine into the goose stepping. We were fine when you came out with a salute. And then I was like, I'm in, let's do this. And Ed will have a picture with a bed sheet. And Lars was like, done. That's no more. Real fast.
Yeah, Lars obviously does not like to sleep on bed sheets.
We have, by the way, Colt is a big fan of the gay Calhoun comment, or the gay XS storyline. He thinks you should have kept it going.
You in real life.
Yeah, that's right. So clearly, I mean, like everybody who played, you reached a point where you really stopped playing. Do you remember what precipitated that? What led you to kind of go, I think that's it?
Yeah, well, so there are a bunch of reasons, Jeff. We all know the main one, which is pure and utter laziness.
Yeah.
Right? I liked, so in 2012, I changed jobs, much more responsibility. Couldn't really, I'll be honest, from my previous job, I had no management, responsibilities. I was just, for what I do, I was a senior analyst. So I would literally sit in my office and for, 2 or 3 years, I would carve out an hour or 2 separate half hours a day and write, right? And be on the boards and make OOC comments and everything. But then when I changed jobs in late 2012, became a director. So I now managed like 5-6 people. I had more responsibilities. I had to write reports. They weren't long reports, but I had to do a lot of writing for work.
Did you have to do them with HTML?
No, thank God, no. Fucking hated HTML. But like 4 times a year for each quarter, I was writing 20 plus reports. And they were only like 1-page reports, but it's burnout. So the last thing I wanted to do after that is write about wrestling.
Right.
So, that took away from my free time. Then, young kid at home. And I didn't want to be on the computer when I was home for the most part.
Yep. And 2 now, right?
Yeah, 2 now. Both of them are half Asian, so I do have them from the same wife.
Yeah. The question is not about whether it's the same mother.
Well, fair point. Might not even be.
So I know you do a lot of stuff. I think most of it, with your son, lots of sports and stuff. Is that where most of your spare time goes these days?
Yeah, on the weekends, he does travel baseball, travel basketball. So I'm always running around, getting him, practicing with him.
Does he know that there are no genes in his family tall enough for basketball, that it's not his future?
I have told him, I said, you have no shot of excelling past maybe high school. But he actually likes baseball better, which is good because he's kind of slow.
Oh, that's good.
Not slow like, half the people that used to play FedEx, but slow as in running.
Like physically slow.
Yeah, physically slow.
Gotcha. So is there a standout thing that you miss from playing?
Yeah, personalities, creativity, some of the storylines, they were just great. Even if I wasn't involved in them, just reading them would I would sit at work when I would read them and just laugh or smile or smirk. And there's so many times I'm like, God damn it, I have no time to jump in on this, and I would really want to.
Yeah.
Like we just said, I especially like those storylines or angles where it was just shit thrown together and somebody would just turn it into something massive and it would like overtake the Fed. And you just think back like, wow, it's just such a throwaway post by that person. And then boom, it just became something huge.
Yeah, that's interesting. The idea that you're sitting and reading and you just feel the urge, but you don't have the time to jump in is certainly I can remember that frustration. I think the other thing that happened to me a lot is I would read something, whether I was at work or whether I was on my phone, and I would start laughing and people around me would be like, what's so funny? And I'm like, how do I explain this? Yeah. Fake internet wrestling is so funny. That's what's so funny.
Yeah, they're not real people, I promise you.
That's right. What's the thing you miss the least about playing? Like, what's the piece where you're like, oh no, I'm still super happy I don't play because of that?
The actual effort it takes. No, but like, so writing the angles or storylines or progressing storylines, those were fun. But
Right.
writing match action and the actual matches was very cumbersome after a long career. So I don't miss that part of it. I don't miss having to scan the boards after being away for a day or two, especially if an active fed, because God knows I wasn't usually reading every post, and then of course I jump in thinking I read everything I should, and I'm like, nope, I just totally no-sold somebody.
And didn't worry about it at all. Like, all right, well, I did it. Time to move on.
Exactly.
Yeah, I get it.
Back then I wouldn't admit it.
So I'm reading some of the updates we're getting. Gary, despite all of his trash talk, Bagel Guy says he'd like to see more of these in the future. But his shitty taste in drinking and getting laid is more important than listening to shitty ass host tonight interview a legend. So let's just say this. I am interviewing a legend, and there's no chance Gary's getting laid. It doesn't even matter that he's married. Zero. But he does have shitty taste in beer, so I totally agree about that. All right.
What beer does he like?
Well, the fact that he's not drinking bourbon, he's drinking beer is all the commentary I needed.
I've only had bourbon a few times. I like it now, but it took me a long time to
it's
like
growing
it.
On you? It should
Yeah.
grow on you. You have access to so much good stuff, too. I do some of my best bourbon shopping when I'm in New York. There's just so many great places. The liquor store on Park Avenue is fantastic. They bring in great stuff. Okay, so for you, when you got started, and I've been asking a lot of people this lately, but there's clearly a moment where, as you're playing, you realize that you're better than most players, that you're like, you can actually figure out what punctuation is used for, and you can tell a story, and you can stay in character. When's the moment that you looked at it and went, I've made it? Like, if this was real wrestling, I know I have a future, and that guy's going to work at Walmart.
See, good thing I've been listening to these dopey podcasts, because I think I was asked this question, or we went through this question. I think it was podcast 3 actually. So it's the same answer anyway, but I'll say it again. So it was in Wrestle. I think I was in CWA. I was upper mid carding, maybe a main event here and there, but XS still really wasn't, a top player. He still in the shadows of a Genocide and whoever else. Maybe Barrister was there, and they were feuding with, I don't know, could have been Chevalier, whoever it was, but
we just got cut off on the live stream, so there's almost certainly something we didn't know about it that I'll have to look into. So we have just picked up. I should have recorded the whole thing, so I could have loaded it.
Okay.
I'll see if I can download it from the live stream and do that, but let's continue. We were just in the conversation around when was the moment that you realized your character had made it, that you were good enough that you were going to be a talent, as opposed to whatever the scrubs were that were playing in show when we got there.
Yeah, it was definitely CWA. A couple of the main eventers like Genocide, I think Barrister, they might have went off. Either Gino would always take time off like I would, but back then I was actually very active. So it was CWA. I think XS started main eventing, won a couple of world titles for a few months. Definitely was one of the people that carried the feds. So between that and winning the US SOBI or TS, whatever they called it, I always forget what the fuck they called it. After many tries, that was definitely the start of him becoming like a top wrestler.
Right.
FedEx, it took him longer, to be honest. Like, it was different. Like, Wrestle, he was, call it a top 10 to 15 player there, when I was active with him. I was very competitive with him, both role playing and on the Sims. In FedEx, it took longer. I think I had to really get used to the style and be more consistent with the posting. But, I think it wasn't until, so in FedEx, it was more post, even though he lost the match with Nighthawk, I think that then he started becoming more of a, around the main event scene for a while. And then,
so you're saying that Nighthawk made you?
Yeah, he unknowingly put me over. And then the king of wrestling,
King of the Street Fight, right?
Oh yeah, whatever. Yeah, that he won. I mean, that was,
King of Wrestling was the event, but you were the second year King of the Street Fight. You won the second year, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And who'd you beat in the finals?
Another one of my favorites, Aaron Action.
And that must have been a squeaker. I don't know how you got through that one.
Yeah, that was literally torture to write that match.
So Excess and Haley, you talked about. We know. Did you have other characters that we don't know? Were there ones that people would be surprised, or ones people would go, "I don't even know who he's talking about"?
Yeah, so there's definitely. I had two in C-Slam. My first C-Slam character was his name was Da Crusher, which I think I got from like that Bugs Bunny cartoon from years ago.
Yeah, I remember the cartoon. Yeah.
Da Crusher. So he was like this steroid abusing. He had a valet, Haley, and he abused her and all that stuff. And I ran with him for like a month and actually got promoted to maybe CBF or something like that. But he was so bad and so boring that I just dropped him after 3 weeks in the national. And he actually came back to wrestle once to stalk Haley or something like that. But it was just like a really shitty angle I think I ran with for a few weeks. The only other character that was worth talking about was in wrestle I used Clarence T, who was a gentleman of color who accused every single person in his life and work of being racist. So that was a lot of fun to run with. He would tag team with Philly Fats for a while. I forgot what their tag team name was, but those are really the only two that are even worth mentioning.
Unbelievable. Actually, it's not. That you played that character is in no way unbelievable.
The opposite of Johnny XS, almost.
Almost. Was there an angle or a feud or a match that you liked so much that you was like if I was going to play again, that's what I would like. That was so great. I would like that to be that's what I would like to do if I was going to play again.
So if there was one match that would bring me back, I would want the rematch between the BFFs and the SBFFs.
Oh yeah.
Because that was a shitload of fun.
It was. So for the record, everybody, the BFFs were Strife and Johnny XS, and the SBFFs were Genocide and Alan Scott. Yeah, good match. Yeah,
that was one. Tag matches were always a pain in the ass, but because you have to follow everything. But those were that whole series of posts were. They were posts that I actually read carefully, every single one, because it was just so entertaining.
Easy to pay attention to and follow when it was that engaging. Totally get that. So this should be an easy one for you. Name a character you hated that other people seem to like.
Why do I always have to go back to poor Nighthawk?
It's fine.
But did anybody like him? I don't know. And Aaron Action is definitely a kind of a close second. And the main reason I've said this in the past, I just hated selling that
Dusty Rhodes accent.
Yeah, it was just terrible. A lot of people, or maybe some people, enjoyed Angelica's posts. I never enjoyed any of them. I'm sure the feeling's mutual. She hates me. I dislike her in character. She might be a nice lady outside of the world of online wrestling, but I never liked the whole anything revolving around vampires and all that shit. Much more believable when you have a cokehead who's a talent Nazi. I mean,
yeah, play something realistic.
Exactly.
Was there a character you liked that you think everybody else just kind of trashed and didn't care for at all?
I don't know. I kind of, if they were shitty, I'm usually on that bus of hating them. But I mean, Solo was a parody. Some people really hated him.
Does anybody know who Solo was?
Are you sure it wasn't you? Because you're the king of like masking.
Yeah. I'm actually certain in this case it was not me.
Okay.
I love a good mask. The actual masking feature in Wrestle was my idea. Like I'm 100% for masking, but Solo showed up and doesn't get enough love for how good a parody he was. I mean, for me, I don't know if he came first, but he was Thor before Thor was Thor.
Yeah, he was way before Thor.
Right. And brilliant, just brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody would actually like, there are those really poorly written posts by some of those newcomers that were really bad, and you would just see them and not even read them. But when Solo posted, people would go in there and read them because it was great.
Well, it was just so bad, and yet it was like still having C-Slam around and being able to go find the post by the newest player at all times. Like it was like you posted for the first time as a 14-year-old in C-Slam and never learned to get better. That's really what it was. So yeah, I think that's great. I love that idea. Why don't we, before we get into any of the kind of wrap-up questions, why don't we do some Ask XS? Because we got a wonderful selection of Ask XS questions. And I can just work my way down. There's so many of them.
Okay, let's do that. Let's go that way.
All right. So let's start with this. Question number one came from Shreddy Mercury. Our friend Seth, who is out of New York City, who played Eliza the Prophet. And the question was this. If two girls walk into XS's apartment with chlamydia, how many walk out with gonorrhea and a gift card to Olive Garden?
Well, first of all, XS would never give anybody a gift card, even if they blew him. In fact, they walk out losing $50 because he probably picks their pocket as they're in a bathroom.
Seems legit.
And then they all probably get the same STD.
Yeah.
From Johnny.
That's fair.
He's definitely carried quite a few in his career.
Cold ass one I really liked. What are some gimmicks from a wrestler or FedExer or somebody from C-Slam that you wish you were in charge of because the creator didn't do justice to the gimmick?
I feel like I read
that's a good question.
I know. It was really good. And I was thinking of an answer earlier today and I'm forgetting it, but because there were so many good characters that either due to inactivity or due to, they had a good gimmick, but the writer behind them just wasn't talented enough. But, I thought Emissary could have been so much better than what he was. Like he always had a pretty good gimmick, whether it was in Wrestle or FedEx. He could have really been one of those players that got to the top.
Agreed.
Static, I know I'm going way back. He was. There was so much to work with him, but he just is another one.
Is that a fat joke?
Well, we just turned him into fat. We ruined him.
We really did.
And Nighthawk. I mean, anybody could have turned that into something.
Oh, I'm so entertained. That's so good. All right. Hey, we've got one from Matt Warzala. That's Royal Ryan Scott. What inspired you to create Haley, and what were you hoping to do with her that you didn't or couldn't do with XS?
I don't remember why I created her, to be honest. I know when I first did, it was when Wrestle was expanding with MIA, I think it was like their third national or fourth. I don't remember how many they had. And I threw her in there, or I got promoted, whatever it was.
Right.
And I don't even remember if I had her come in as Johnny's cousin initially, or maybe I just didn't mention it. But I think I just wanted to see if I could create a female wrestler without all the stupid drama that would always go behind the scenes. Not behind the scenes, but in the RP, as far as her on her period and she's feeling so lonely and she wants, this whole relationship drama. I wanted her to just be a pure bitch who wanted to compete. I always made sure I sold her getting her ass kicked by larger wrestlers and not body slamming them and doing all the shit that Alan Scott would hate.
Yeah.
So, but oddly enough, she won both major tournaments in Wrestle before XS, which so
did that bug you at all?
A little bit. It did, because I'm like, here I was spending with Johnny trying to really get him, to the top of the mountain, and here she comes. I'm like, how the fuck did she win?
That's wild. Now, did you ever have both of them in separate feds make it to the USOB?
Yeah, a bunch of times. I actually had 4 in the USLB at once. But them 2, I think, made it to the final 4 once. I don't remember if it was one that either one of them won though.
Yeah. All right, let's see what else we got. Colt asks, if you could fondle one other character in real life, who would it be and why would it be Colt?
Well, it would be Colt because his gap is just like this. So you can get just like that on my tongue.
We've got to have limits. There's got to be limits.
It's a children's show. You're right.
That's right. Hey, Dewan, who played Cat and Mad Bomber, asks, what wrestler or C-slammer other than yourself do you admire the most and why?
Admire the most? I don't really.
That's not language we normally speak around.
Yeah, I don't admire any of you. You're all creeps like me in your own way.
That's a heck of a curveball. That's a tough question.
I'll say this. There's about 5 or 6 players.
Colt's live commenting, and he saw your gesture and is for it, which is so disturbing.
I could always count on him.
Yeah, that's Colt. We appreciate you, brother.
Yeah, but there's like 4 or 5 players who, whenever they would post in, whether it, for you, it would always be if Ed posted, or if it was Alan and Gino posting off each other.
Yep.
Like, I would stop and make sure I read it. Anything Strife would post, especially if I'm in that fed, I would stop and read it. There were players like Stormfire, who he's another one. He took a stupid throwaway post of mine one time and turned that shit into pure gold and ran with it in an event, and it was amazing. So he was always somebody that I loved to read. I would say Benny Blair, but that would take me 7 hours to read. So Benny's so talented, but I could never get through his posts.
Have you listened or seen any of the newer podcasts? Because I blatantly accused him of writing 10,000 words to make people quit.
It's why I would limit my interact. That's why I wouldn't interact with him as much. Yeah. That would just mean I would have to then spend 45 minutes reading another post.
Oh, crap. No kidding. Hey, before I get to the next Ask XS, I've got a question for you. Did you have any swerves that you enjoyed more than the streak? Do you remember the right before New Year's?
I'll tell you, that was the one time, and I think I read it. I think I was relatively drunk or getting drunk, and I remember seeing it, and that was the closest I've ever been annoyed at Genocide or Jason Miller. It's like this motherfucker knew that nobody could reply. He posted at like 11:58. I was so annoyed for like 3 minutes.
Which means he thought it up 4 days beforehand, had it all lined up, and looked and went, how close to midnight can I get before I drop this, post it, and then go on about my evening?
It was pure gold. I mean, I have to give him credit on that. You know what? But I don't remember a lot of my swerves anymore. I just don't. I mean, I know I've swerved quite a few people, but I don't remember.
Well, I remember that Max Entropy saved Haley from losing Stable Wars to Corporate America, which was XS and Ed and Marlowe and.
Yeah, that was the only time I was ready to let Haley lose, and then Max swerved us,
and you won again.
Was it? Who did he join up with? Was it Storm and somebody else?
Yeah, they started the whole Bloodlines. We're all part of the same Dark Coven thing. That died in no time.
Yeah, I think it died right around the time Stable Wars ended, like a month later.
Right. And I'm fairly certain we had a really legitimate shot at knocking off the network.
Yeah, we were in second place in points. I think we just had to win one or two of the final whatever events. And
we had some really strong players, obviously, really good players. So, yeah, that one was I was frustrated.
I do remember us talking in back channels, cursing Max a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. Hey, our friend in England who played Titus Fuchs for everybody or Stoner Boy, and who may or may not have a new character on the boards as we speak. He asked XS, hey, if you had to throw somebody under the bus, and not the obvious ones that we always throw under the bus, like Dice or Kitty, who would it be? And would you do it horribly and then throw their kids under as well?
So what are we throwing them under the so not the literal?
I assume what he's asking is that you fire shots at somebody who thinks they're a good player, that you would like to correct them of their misunderstanding of their.
Okay, that's fair. See, if this was the old podcast episode, probably 5, 6, 7, or 8, I would say Johnny Rude, because I think
because that was the theme of the podcast. I was talking to Rude about that earlier, and he said at some point the podcast just became about taking dumps on me.
I'm still waiting for that to happen. I keep listening, like, we're still pretty nice to him here.
It takes a sharp turn, right? And I'm pretty sure we're all familiar with where the sharp turn was. Never, ever, ladies and gentlemen, ever invite your significant other on a podcast with us.
Adequate. I throw under. Wow. Let me see if I could think about that, and we'll circle back after.
All right, we'll come back to that one. Let's talk a little bit. I mean, you were one half of what I recently tagged as potentially the worst commissioner of all time. What the hell happened? We gave you a Fed, you wanted a Fed, you did it as a couple, and you promptly turned it over to the least competent assistant ever. And basically we're like, I don't know, is it still running? I have no idea.
Well, you failed to tell me that it involved work. I thought you'd just give it to me, and it just runs itself. There's results, there's counting posts, there's reading posts. Who the fuck wants to do that as a commissioner and not get paid for it? And then you still expect me to maybe play with my other character on other boards?
Yeah. You were Ed's tag team partner, so I fully expect that.
I don't know that I had commissioned only one other time in Wrestle, and I could tell you that it went the same way. I might have read. It was in indie, one of the lower feds. Probably had about 25 wrestlers in there. 3 or 4 were people I knew. A few others were people that looked like they were talented. I probably read in the month. I probably read 10 posts. It was bad.
How'd you book cards?
Good question. Drunk? I threw a lot of shit together.
However you wanted to, I take it.
Yeah, it was, somebody would request a title shot. Sure, have a title shot. Why not? Makes no sense, but sure.
Seems relatively safe that nobody's going to name you as the favorite commissioner they came up under. Except for, was it Hawthorne? Was that the guy who...
Yes. I don't even... Who played him? Do you know?
No.
Okay.
No. If I knew, I'd be able to ban him. That's how bad I think he is.
Yeah, between me, him, and Gino, we still couldn't run a quarter of a Fed.
Oh my gosh. It was a complete and utter train wreck. So we appear to have made our way through all of our Ask XS questions, which is surprising. Yep, that is the end of the Ask XS question. So I have a couple more for you before we wrap up.
Sure.
First of all, you are traditionally everybody's contact point if they want to get hold of strife or genocide. Why do the douchebags only speak through you?
So, genocide, I'm one of the few people I think that had his personal email for a while. I'm sure you do too. But I would randomly email him every year or so just to see how everything's going. And he usually replied back and we'd shoot the shit, and reply back like 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
I think the last time I spoke to him, maybe he had a second kid now or something, which was a few years ago. I know his oldest daughter is of age now for Johnny, so maybe that's why he's been avoiding everything. I think she's 7 now, maybe. I'm just saying. But he hasn't replied. I've emailed him twice now since.
Which is only funny because he was on the boards, on maybe the OC boards or something like.
A few months ago, right?
Like less than 2 weeks ago.
Really?
Yeah. So I don't know what his deal is, but it would be interesting to see him actually dial back in. I mean, why would he want to show up and play with Max when he could show up and play when we're playing? Like, clearly. That's right, Bill. I said clearly, as in there would be no uncertainty at all about which was the better option.
In Stripe, I just always have had his email address from a long time ago. He's like an artist in the Cincinnati area, I think.
Oh, okay.
Aaron, and I remember when I was buying my house like 10 years ago, I told him, I said, I might want to buy one of your artworks. Or I said, it was more like, you should give this to me for my birthday because we're BFFs. But then we lost touch then. I haven't talked to him in God, it's got to be 5-6 years. But I emailed him about a week ago trying to, when you told me to reach out.
Yeah, let's see if we can get a hold of him. He has come up in every one of the podcasts since we restarted, except maybe for Ubs, and I'd have to double check because there's even a chance we talked about him in that one. So yeah, and it's funny, I didn't know he was in Cincinnati. Like, I used to spend a lot of time down there. I would have been happy to connect and grab beers. That would have been cool. Punch him in the face in real life would have been great. Hey, I just found, because you and I traded a couple extra Ask XS's. I believe the Ask XS question came in. What happened between podcast 3 and podcast 4 because Grayson no longer sounds like a chipmunk?
That's right. Yeah. You especially, well, if you go to podcast 1, you sound like you're 9 years old and somebody's twisting your nutsack. If you go to 2, it's a little bit better. 3, it's still and then 4, it's like you're a grown man again.
I bought an actual mic. It made a difference. And the other one was, hey, why did Bill wear his grandfather's reading glasses during the last podcast?
I could not get over that. I was watching that podcast. I think was I in Florida yet? I might have been. When did you guys post that one? Was it last week?
Yeah, so I think we recorded it last week or maybe even late in the weekend, maybe last Sunday.
Okay, well, whatever. It doesn't matter when, but I remember looking at it, and I've never seen Bill with glasses before, you know, from his other times on video, and I was just looking. I'm like, he has like these glasses that an old like Italian man would wear. I don't know. It was comical. I liked it. It was a good look on him. Bill, you look sexy in them.
That's not true, Bill.
I know, I'm lying.
Yeah. So we're getting real close. We're going to wrap this up in a minute, but let me ask the question. Is there someone, and let's take Strife out of the equation. Is there someone that hasn't been on the podcast yet that you would like to see be on the podcast?
Yeah, so obviously if we could get a reunion of the Chuckleheads, that would be fun. But then we would need Jordan on with us.
Yeah,
because that's the only way it works.
Right. Are you really Chuckleheads without Jordan?
Yeah. Now, if I could be on the podcast, I would want the other Canadian Jeff, Led Jeff, to come on, because I remember laughing my ass off for like 10 minutes when he first popped on and said, "Hi guys," or with some like weird half Canadian, half Switzerland accent or something.
So I thought it was French. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I have no idea what it was, but that would make me extremely happy to be able to laugh in his face again. Love to hear Colt's sweet voice again.
Yeah, we had Colt on. Yeah, and as I recall, he was super bitter because we weren't nicer to him.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to find that one and reload it, Colt, just so we can listen to it and remember why you were bitter so that we can make sure to do it again. It's kind of what we do. Before we go, let's go back to the question Chris asked. Who would you throw under the bus that we don't traditionally throw under the bus, and throw them hard enough that their kids get dragged in under after them?
So if we're throwing somebody under the bus, we're thinking they're way better than what they were or are. These are tough questions. Because I feel like everybody who was like that, we would usually call them out and throw them under the bus on the OOC boards.
So true.
Okay, I'm going to give a very unpopular answer with a lot of what the people have said. And this isn't anything, it's actually not personal, and it's not saying that they weren't good writers, because they were. But I'll throw the entire system except Manhaniels under the bus. And I'll back it up.
Manhaniels, because we love Manhaniels.
We all love Manhaniels. And I would back the bus up multiple times, run them over with their kids, their grandkids.
So we're talking about Dan Haven. We're talking about Matt McDervish.
Yes.
Who else is in? Who else is in the system?
Cannibal, I think, towards the
Cannibal.
Second. I like Cannibal. He was a good guy.
Yeah, he's a good writer.
The system itself wasn't my cup of tea.
Right.
Like, it was a little too, again, not saying I'm not a hypocrite. I'm a big time hypocrite, because half the shit that we all post makes no fucking sense at all. But I couldn't get into some of the stuff that they were writing.
Yeah.
And that's just me. It's all subjective.
Listen, don't soften the blow. I'm 90% certain that none of them, except maybe Manhaniels, is going to see this.
It's a good point too.
Yeah. Drive hard. Colt says it wasn't that. It was that he was boring as hell. He thinks he might have been on meds after a surgery, to which I would say most of us are on some kind of meds during the podcast. That's to be expected. That's no excuse for boring.
But I do remember him being a huge letdown. We expected a lot more fun.
We did. The bar was very high, Cole.
Yeah.
We really thought the genius would be unleashed in the live format, and it was not. It's safe to say Price was more entertained by Mandy being on the podcast. I don't know how you feel about that, but I do not feel good for you.
Yeah, that's not something you want to be proud of.
Okay. So, Colt, let's do it again. Bring your A game. Use a different type of drug next time. Whatever it takes. Do better. All right. Any last thoughts for everybody?
I strongly suggest you all go to the boards and not post.
Not post. That's appropriate on so many levels. All right. That's Johnny XS. I'm Alan Scott. We appreciate you guys. We will talk to everybody next time. Thanks all.
Love you, miss you.
See you guys.